Chapter 2. Let the Party Begin. Within minutes, a car pulls into the driveway, and a couple around the same age then emerges, carrying bags of snacks and drinks and needing to fight a couple of strong gusts on the way to the front door. Joe even losing his baseball cap and limpingly hustling to retrieve it as the gust blows it along like a tumbleweed before it stops in the middle of the yard. Bob, beaming at the fact that his first hurricane party has begun, and Karen, needing to feign happiness, greet their guests with smiles on their faces. "I really wish we weren't here right now," Patty states with sarcastic excitement as Joe approaches, but Joe insisted we stay. "Oh, I feel the same way," Karen agrees in a high, contrived, festive voice, feeling a little more at ease that someone relates to her. Even though she is a trumper, Karen thinks while hugging Patty. "Oh, don't be a stick in the mud," Joe says to Patty with a wide grin as she ominously stares at palm trees next to the house whose fronds rustle in the swirling gusts. Upon exchanging the usual pleasantries, they take the food into the kitchen and begin the party. "What'll it be, Joe?" Bob asks. "What do you have?" "How about a dark and stormy?" Bob suggests with a smile, holding up a bottle of Gosling's to Joe's approval. "I'll have one too," Patty interjects before turning to Karen and adding, "Something to get me through this," leading Karen to crack a small smile. Everything seems fine so far, Karen thinks, removing the food from the oven and advising the men to move to the living room while she and Patty follow behind with the food. The TV in the living room blares that only a very small window of time remains to evacuate, all of this occurring while stronger and stronger gusts and bouts of rain continually whip the house. "Let's turn that off," Joe recommends as Patty silently disapproves back in the kitchen. "Great idea," Bob concurs, picking up the remote. "It's going to hit Tampa. Let's not hear this shit," he utters, amazing Karen yet again as to his inconsistencies. "Hear, hear," Joe boasts, holding up his glass, and Bob approvingly chinking. "I really wanted to leave," Patty quietly expresses to Karen in the kitchen, rolling her eyes in reaction to Joe's festive behavior. "So did I," Karen agrees without hesitation. "My kids have been texting me that Joe's crazy for wanting to stay," Patty explains, looking frantically at her phone. "But he's all like, there won't be a storm surge because of the wind patterns and where we are in the state," imitating him in a mocking tone. "God, Bob said similar things too," Karen says exasperatedly and relaxes a bit. "And it's just like, where do you get this information?" "Right? They never say, and I've never heard them say that on the news or on the Weather Channel," Patty responds, also now more at ease. "But it's not like I can just leave him out here." "I thought about it a few times, honestly," Karen confesses. Patty laughs and divulges, "So did I. These men are so stubborn." "Indeed. But Joe's stubbornness has gotten him where he is," Patty qualifies her previous statement a bit. "He is often right and is always the first in line to tell you he's right, even when he's wrong." "Men," Karen concludes, thinking that Patty's remark does not bode well for the party, as Bob acts similarly. "Men." After a brief pause, Patty asks, "Was your father that way?" "No, in fact," Karen answers before taking a reflective pause and recalling, "he was actually a very thoughtful, studious, and agreeable man. So strange he's ended up losing his mind, especially since he's in really good health for his age. You should see some of his carvings." She then picks up a pizza and ushers Patty, carrying some plates, into the living room. "Let's take this time to appreciate how good we have it," Joe toasts upon seeing Patty and Karen. "There's a bad storm outside and a lot of problems in the world, but goddamn, we have friendship, dark and stormies, and DiGiorno's." "I like this guy," Bob declares to Karen, pointing at Joe with his thumb. Karen, annoyed at Bob's continual hypocrisy, thinks reflexively, These Trumpkins are no friends of mine, though Patty has grown on her some. And even something like that remote right there, Joe continues, as if he is the host. Remember when we used to have to actually get up to change the TV channel? Absolutely, Bob exclaims, clearly eager to talk about something other than the storm and enjoy himself finally. And those rabbit ear antennas, we'd spend half an hour adjusting them to get a decent picture. Sometimes we'd have to take turns holding them in place. Now kids complain if it buffers for a few seconds. Patty lets out a snicker upon hearing this before contributing a tangent. And don't get me started on music. We had to save up for records, and each one was a treasure. Kids today just download everything in seconds, can have thousands of albums on their phones. Now, even Karen loosens up a bit, and, ever ready to complain about younger generations, pitches, and kids are just glued to their screens these days. Would it hurt them to go outside and actually meet up with their friends face to face? Those were the days, Patty reminisces, looking down at her drink. We had so much freedom and imagination. Nowadays, kids are so overscheduled. You have to be there at noon and here at 3 and another place at 6. We just had the neighborhood and our bikes, and that was enough. Exactly, Joe retorts. And what about the cost of things? I remember when a gallon of gas was less than $1. Everything's so much more expensive now. Like houses, Bob jumps in, always proud to advertise how much their home up north and the Rachel have appreciated over the past few years. We bought our home up in Mass for what seems like peanuts compared to today's prices. Its value has actually increased more than tenfold. Same with our place up in Ohio, Joe makes known. If you don't mind my asking, how much did you pay for this place? $2 million 7 years ago, Bob replies before adding proudly, no mortgage. Joe nods approvingly before disclosing, as if he himself had been asked the question. We got ours here for $300K back in '95, and the appreciation's been crazy the past few years. Has it ever, Bob agrees. We'd spend our kids' Christmas vacations here and some of the summer until Joe retired back in 2016, Patty offers. That's when I retired too, Bob exclaims. Well, wouldn't you know, Joe replies. Too bad our kids can't seem to catch a break in this housing market, Karen jumps in. What do you mean? Joe rejoins with a look of genuine confusion. They can always catch a break with hard work. Just look at me and Bob. We sure knew how to pick ourselves up by the bootstraps. Sensing the conversation might take a political turn, Karen does not care and disagrees. Our daughter and her husband both have masters, have good jobs, and still live paycheck to paycheck. They live comfortably, don't get me wrong, but they don't have much disposable income with a mortgage, car payments, all the insurance payments, 2 kids, and inflation. What do? Joe inquires. Bob appears slightly embarrassed as Karen answers, they both work in education. So teachers? Joe asks dismissively. Well, Rachel's husband, Kyle, is a guidance counselor, Karen corrects him. Well, that explains it. Joe concludes self-righteously, Patty's face and posture tensing a bit. Teachers get so much time off and are always asking for more money. Such a drain on our system. Who are you to say they don't work hard? Bob challenges Joe, understanding how much time and concern Rachel and Kyle give to their jobs. In the spirit of this party, why don't we change the subject? Things have been so nice so far, Karen, suppressing a desire to defend Rachel, as Bob has already done so, suggests to Patty's approval. And what about your children? She asks Patty directly, already not a fan of Joe. Our one son, Tim, is doing well, Patty explains, showing them a picture of his family on her phone. A lawyer making good money. Here's his wife and our beautiful grandchildren. They are beautiful, Karen observes, peering onto the screen. And did you have another son? Joe scoffs before Patty answers, well, our youngest, David, is a digital nomad, her voice rising as if unsure she knows the exact term, who teaches online and travels around the world. He's in Cambodia or someplace now. Cambo diarrhea, if you ask me, Joe adds with a scowl, Bob cracking a smirk. Pinko's really He stops to censor himself, seeing Patty look forlorn. Mess that place up. Well, that's really interesting about David, is it? Karen, finding Joe obnoxious, replies approvingly to Patty, having always found enticing the allure of world travel, though never strong enough to pursue. He makes practically no money and just travels and says he writes books or whatever, but I've never seen anything. Joe cannot let the topic go, and he says the rest of the world is more interesting than the US. What the hell does the world have that we don't? Patty and I can proudly say we've never had a passport and have been to all 50 states and Canada and Mexico. He finishes, picking up his glass and taking a large gulp. Oh, we love traveling, Karen comments, neither Joe nor Patty caring to follow her line, with Joe merely uttering, "Oh yeah?" Our youngest reminds me of our youngest in the Peace Corps, Bob remarks, ignoring Karen and taking the conversation down a different tangent. I just don't understand it. Giving Bob a look of sympathy, Joe defeatedly confirms, the Peace Corps, huh? That's rough. David wanted to do that shit. Does he get paid for that at least? Bob grumbles. Not much. Gets a stipend. Bob then looks up and declares confidently, it's nothing compared to what he could earn with his degree. Is he really young? Isn't the Peace Corps for college grads? Inquires Patty equivocally. He joined in his 30s after years of working with NGOs, Karen replies, causing looks of disapproval to cross Joe and Patty's faces. Oh God, Joe blurts out, Bob appearing as upset as Joe. Bob then briefly looks at Karen before turning his head back to them, saying, we just don't get why he'd want to live in some remote village when he could be here making a great living. Sometimes they just have to follow their own path, I guess, Karen states, thinking about Ben's text from earlier and how she had even considered the Peace Corps in college after learning how JFK had created it to counter the destructive behavior of the CIA. This was before meeting Bob. But I get Bob, she qualifies, sensing Bob's disapproval of her defending Ben taking his particular path. It's hard to see them struggling when they could have an easier life. Exactly, Patty exclaims, as if she had been holding back her sentiment. We work so hard to give them opportunities, and it feels like David's just throwing it all away. I don't understand how you can be so smart and want to use your intelligence for anything other than getting rich. Right? If I were as smart as Ben, I'd be loaded right now, Karen responds with a laugh. At least Tim is climbing in his practice and making us proud, Patty consoles herself as Joe nods with his hand on her knee. At that moment, the electricity cuts out, much to everyone's annoyance. Karen and Bob pull out their phones to turn on their lights, Karen noticing urgent texts from Rachel, emergency services, and others. Patty notices similar messages on her phone, and she and Karen both voice concern, especially now that they can hear water hitting the wall outside them, but the men do not want to hear it. Karen, realizing the impossibility of evacuating at this point, suppresses her feelings and rises delicately, feeling weakness due to her MS. Bob goes to help her and discloses to the couple Karen was recently diagnosed with MS. I'm so sorry to hear that, Patty tells Karen sympathetically. My cousin has it as well. Who doesn't have a major problem these days? Joe poses to the group as Karen and Bob light candles. Been on lisinopril for years now, he then adds unsolicitedly, leading Karen to think that Bob could even learn something from him. Yeah, I've had Parkinson's for a couple of years now. Thankfully hasn't gotten that bad, Patty divulges, as the room assumes a cozy, incandescent atmosphere despite the disaster occurring outside. Bob never goes to the doctor, Karen then tells everyone. Oh, you really need to go as you get older, Joe immediately suggests to Bob, the candles now casting their shadows around the room, especially down here, all kinds of skin cancer. Patty and I have both had cancer removed, he informs them as they sit back down, pointing to a piece of the top of his left ear missing, something Karen had wondered about earlier. Karen and Bob pause as they settle back into their seats, and the four sit silently for a moment as Karen and Patty send texts. Seeming to spend the brief silence allowing feelings from earlier to brew, Joe vents, "It makes me angry. Kids have so many more opportunity these days. We had it so much harder, And we just had to work hard, and that's what we did. No handouts. And when I mention these things, David just says, okay, boomer. Like, what the hell does that even mean? As if we aren't obviously right. He's just a lazy piece of shit, if you ask me." "Joe, let's not go there. We're with friends," Patty states under her breath to him, looking down, placing her hand on his knee, and tilting her head toward Bob and Karen. Karen now feels a need to defend the younger generation a bit, especially since she feels Joe is also referring to Ben. Only she and Bob have the right to talk to and about him that way. "We definitely had it easier with the job market and the housing market," Karen counters Joe. "Even with good degrees, it's so competitive. Our niece has a PhD and can only find adjunct positions that pay just $10,000 per semester." "What's her PhD in? Art history or gender studies?" Joe continues to chide, Patty dropping her head and shoulders in defeat. Karen looks down sheepishly before quietly divulging comparative literature. Joe scoffs again, sitting up, the candle on the table between them casting a shadow as he gesticulates while he asserts, "My point exactly. She wouldn't have that problem if she had an actual good degree." "Joe, please," Patty pleads again, drawing out her pleas before looking over to Bob and Karen and mentioning, "He started drinking really early this morning." "So did Bob," Karen implicates her husband as he looks down at his entwined fingers in embarrassment. "And I might have had a glass of red," she finally reveals, shrugging. "Try a whole bottle," Bob exclaims, ensuring that the couple know the truth. "It wasn't a whole bottle," Karen gaslights, as Bob gives her an "I know you're bullshitting me" look before concluding, "Okay, maybe half a bottle." "Don't worry, I actually polished one off this morning," Patty finally confesses. "Well, in that case, here's to the good old days when things seem simpler and more affordable," Karen toasts, feeling the alcohol really begin to relax her, though still shuddering a bit as a wicked gust strikes the house. "And also to hoping our kids find their way in this crazy world." "We can toast to that," Patty agrees, holding up her glass and looking to Joe, the two husbands reluctantly joining, almost appearing to want to keep venting. Throughout the conversation, the winds had picked up, and now a constant roar rages above everything. Shrieking gusts heard from far off fling across the gulf like missiles and strike the Rachel with great force, causing loud bangs and shaking the entire house, leading everyone within to stir to varying degrees. Rain pelts the shutters, sounding like a firing machine gun. Now, waves bat against the storm shutters on the ground floor more intensely, letting in water around the edges of the sliding doors. They look at their phones and have no signal, leading to a sinking feeling in Karen's stomach. Little did they know that the cone had shifted southward, with Fort Myers Beach due to receive Ian's inner wall. "Well, would you look at that? We're already in the middle of the storm," Bob cheerily yet falsely observes. "Only a few more hours. Charlie was only 4 hours, right?" "No generation can sit around and shoot the shit quite like ours, am I wrong?" Joe then asks, as if not hearing Bob's question. "The water must be pretty high already," Patty adds, watching the water come inside above the sandbags as each new wave rams the shuttered sliding glass door, augmenting Karen's fear. "There's nothing to worry about. Those sandbags will keep it fairly dry down here," Bob assures everyone, his tone sounding a little less assured as each wave hits the wall. "Our cars are going to be ruined if this keeps picking up," Karen mentions. "Nothing insurance can't help," Joe responds confidently. "This is probably the worst it's going to get, and we've been looking for new cars anyway. All feeling the effects of the alcohol, they, especially Karen and Patty, appear more confident about the situation, becoming more habituated to the shaking house as more fierce gusts strike it. Regardless, Karen still wants to keep her father safe, and some flooding has already begun, so she, looking at Bob, requests that he and Joe help her father upstairs. The two go to her father's room, surprised to see him wearing a suit, and usher him up to the guest room. Her father stands there after shuffling to a halt and shakes a bit before requesting with a strong yet aged voice, "Bring me my most recent coffin, a hammer, and nails." Joe and Bob both laugh a bit at the request, but Bob ultimately responds, "Okay, Dad," before the two fetch a hammer and nails from a flooded garage and eventually lug the coffin upstairs as he instructed. Karen's father's request surprises the wives, so Karen follows them. "Why do you need a hammer and nails, Dad?" she inquires upon reaching him. "Do you think I cannot see that a tempest is already upon us?" he asks slowly, turning toward the covered window. "Raging storm, I hear thy voice, I feel thy tempest roar, and in the troubled sky rejoice, that soon shall be no more." Karen shivers a bit, goosebumps breaking out upon hearing this. She pauses and reflects upon the short Blake excerpt while Joe, disregarding the gravity of the moment, quietly breaks the silence, whispering, "Does he always talk this way?" to Bob, with Bob shaking his head in confusion. "Please nail me within it should the storm take a turn for the worse," her father then entreats, holding his daughter's hand strongly. Joe and Bob both snort at the request, but Karen takes it seriously. "Okay, Dad, but only if it gets really bad," Karen concedes, a tear rolling down her cheek. "Hey guys," they all hear Patty calling from downstairs. "What is it?" Joe asks as he moves to the staircase. "Holy shit!" He sees that the water level has risen significantly, with the living room now underwater, approximately ankle high. Patty works her way upstairs with bottles in hand. "What's going on?" Bob asks, approaching Joe and Patty before seeing the situation downstairs. "Honey, I think we're going to have to move the party to our room," Bob states calmly as nervousness dawns on his face for the first time.